AI.
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 I think we need to regulate AI.
AI.
Generative AI.
AI poses a dramatic risk.
AI.
AI.
Artificial intelligence.
AI creators are so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if we really should. AI.
Generative AI.
AI.
Artificial intelligence.
AI.
What? You already know we're talking about it. AI is all the rage right now. Honestly, I kind of feel like I'm getting on the hype train with this video, but here's the thing. I want to talk about it because I'm too deep in it now, and I feel like some issues are not talked about enough. But I don't just want to talk about artificial intelligence. Of course, we're going to go over what it actually is, actual real issues we face today, and how it compares to human intelligence in the well-known video essay fashion. But I also want to talk about the kind of people that are pushing it and their general beliefs concerning AI, because I'm so fucking tired. Going deep into the whole thing, it's pretty hard to remain objective throughout, since there's just so much hype around AI right now, and some of it is not just wrong, but outright harmful. So I apologize if I don't remain completely calm in some places, because only the fact that some things even need to be refuted touches a nerve. You'll see. Some might even call me a speciesist, as if that was a thing. We've always wanted to understand how life itself works. The idea of creating a living thing goes back even before any kind of technology. For example, it was one of the main goals of alchemists, but obviously they weren't dealing with artificial intelligence in its current meaning. With the industrial revolutions and machines becoming more and more advanced over the years, the focus shifted. Maybe we'd have more success in creating an intelligent thinking being using machines. John McCarthy, the organizer of the famous Dartmouth workshop in the summer of 1965, coined the term artificial intelligence. People who attended the workshop became leading figures in AI research in the following years. Talks about thinking machines had already existed by then. Alan Turing himself wrote a paper on it in 1950, wherein he described his thoughts on the matter. AI is not nearly a new thing. You can clearly see that just by looking at pop culture even. Isaac Asimov, the godfather of science fiction, published his famous collection of short stories, I, Robot, in 1950. Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey was released in 1968, which was inspired by Arthur C. Clarke's short stories he had written in the previous decades. When someone talks about AI, it's wise to not just talk about the technology. Viewing the issue in a larger context, its subfields range from mathematics through engineering and neuroscience all the way to philosophy. The fundamental idea, however, is fairly simple. AI systems deal with cognitive functions and tasks we normally associate with human intelligence, such as learning, perception, language processing, logical reasoning, problem solving, and so on. It's important to acknowledge that computer programs don't work the same way human minds do. We don't even have a complete understanding of that, but that's not necessarily an issue. But nevertheless, many systems are modeled after the way we think our minds work. Emphasis on the words "we think" here. Neural networks and deep learning algorithms, for example, are inspired by the ways neurons interact within our brains. But some researchers like to claim that artificial intelligence doesn't even need to be modeled after living beings, just as the Wright brothers didn't create a mechanical bird as the first airplane, and sewing machines don't replicate hand sewing movements. Creating a strong or general AI, AGI for short, has been a goal since the very beginning of the field itself. Stuff like the Terminator, HAL, the computers in the Matrix, or I don't know, Marvin, maybe?
I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
It's still the stuff of science fiction. Weak or narrow AI is more of a reality today. The kind of systems that are designed to perform a narrow set of tasks and only those. Given that many of these narrow AI systems are quite sophisticated and work very well, they can be misleading, such as, you guessed it, ChatGPT. That's only a large language model, but some people are treating it as more than that, including the CEO. But we'll get back to that. Current technology is nowhere near general AI, despite what some people claim. There are different estimates around what time we'll be able to create a machine that gets to our level, or even surpass us. Some say in this decade, others say in this century, and others say never. But people have been saying these things since forever. So when talking about AI ethics, it's a better idea to focus on existing tech and its effects on our current society, because there's already a lot to talk about and it's more likely to affect our day-to-day lives right now. Around general AI, the existing questions are different. It could be interesting to discuss the ethics behind creating a living machine and the kind of ethics the machine itself would have, but for that we would have to make a bunch of assumptions first, which I'm not really a fan of. For now, we'll have to settle for talking about people who are pushing the idea and their general beliefs, because those are real right now, and general AI is not. Alright, so I said we won't only talk about tech, but we'll have to for a bit. Ever since the first computers, scientists' main goal was to get them to perform human tasks. It's often not so clear what can be considered a task that needs cognitive abilities, so let's start with an example of something that isn't AI. Calculators. Back in the day, even this was a job for humans. The movie Hidden Figures centers around 3 women who worked at NASA in such roles and were generally underappreciated. I don't think that word covers it. Doing manual math was one large thing computers replaced, since they could do it cheaper and faster. But if doing complex calculations that used to be a cognitive task done by living, breathing people, why isn't it AI? First of all, you tell the calculator exactly what problem to solve and give it everything it needs. You input the symbols, the numbers, it does the calculation based on set parameters. The cognitive work is still done by the human, having to know what input the given problem needs in order to be solved correctly. You still need to do all the thinking. The calculator only replaced the most manual part of the job. On the other hand, AI is something that does the cognitive task for you, or at least some of it. What kind of thinking it might help or replace largely depends on the task and the system itself. From the mid-1950s to the 1990s, the dominant kind of artificial intelligences were symbolic AI systems that could deal with logical parameters by using a symbolic representation of cognitive tasks. The logic theorist, created in 1956, that is hailed as the very first artificial intelligence, was, for example, able to prove foundational mathematical theorems using a structure called a search tree, which basically means the computer is just going through a set of logical questions and calculations about the input until it reaches a conclusion. This proved that computers actually can be programmed to make decisions, and it was a huge leap forward in terms of computer science. Logical reasoning in computational terms would mean, to take a silly example, in a healthcare setting, the input of fever and cough and difficulty breathing into a symbolic AI system may provide the output pneumonia. I call this one the WebMD simulator, making the job of the physician a bit easier by lifting cognitive load. This kind of programs are called expert systems. They are knowledge bases that aim to aid experts. Like in healthcare, some of these help doctors to choose the most suitable treatment option, and they are still quite popular in this field. But symbolic AI is only working with a bunch of parameters previously set by the programmer, which hugely limits its use. It also can't find patterns by itself. That's machine learning. Cybertron, the first learning machine, was created in the 1960s. It was very far from machine learning systems we have today. It had punched tape as memory. Human operator had to teach it to recognize patterns in the data one by one and tell it when it made a mistake by pushing a button. It already showed the basics needed for a working machine learning algorithm. Data, ideally lots of it, memory, and if needed, reinforcement. These basically find patterns in the data and make predictions based on those for future data. The teaching can be supervised, like email spam filters that are trained using a labeled dataset containing spam and legitimate emails, and the machine learns to tell the difference. It can also be unsupervised when it's not told explicitly what to do and clusters the data by itself. This can help show patterns in the data people missed, but on its own it can be a bit risky, as any statistician will tell you correlations are not causations, and it's not as effective as supervised learning at learning things. Finally, reinforcement is when, after teaching, the algorithm is told whether it made a good or bad prediction, like the way a spam filter can improve if every time you receive a spam email to your inbox by mistake, you tell the program to move it to the spam folder and vice versa. Now we live in the age of big data. Computer processing power and memory capacity can finally allow us to train these algorithms. The machine is fed large amounts of data, learns patterns from it, supervised or unsupervised depending on the task, and then hopefully it will be able to make predictions about stuff it hasn't seen before. By the way, those captcha pictures where you have to select which parts of the picture show a street light to show you're not a robot, by completing those you're helping Google train its AI by telling them why you're seeing what, and so it can learn from it. Today, the most sophisticated AI systems are a mixture of symbolic and machine learning, and they are all over the place. Google has been using AI in its search algorithms since 2015. Facebook uses deep learning to offer targeted advertisements and grow engagement, and Netflix is not only using AI to recommend shows to watch, but it also uses it to collect data about the viewer preferences and produces shows that are sometimes only slightly different to content an AI would generate. And as Hollywood actors and writers keep striking because companies don't think they deserve a living wage, Netflix posts a $900,000 a year AI product manager position. Christ, they suck so bad. More often than not, AI is embedded in systems we use every day, and we don't even realize it. Lots of times AI is used as a tool to create more sophisticated and user-friendly programs, to make certain tasks easier, and sometimes to wow people with what their stuff can do. But it does certainly seem like that artificial intelligence is somewhat stuck in a hype cycle, and we are at a high point right now. And you know what? I really like some of AI. I use AI tools as many of us do. I'm also a researcher. I work with loads of data, and often it's nice to have something show me information on it that's been trained on similar things. I didn't ask ChatGPT to write me this script though. I swear, I worked very hard on this. And I can appreciate that I'm able to ask Google questions in full sentences and even misspell words, and it can still get me what I'm looking for, most times. In terms of work, AI can also be used to automate boring and repetitive things, do dangerous tasks human would have to do otherwise, reduce energy and water consumption by finding optimal ways for their uses, and so on. There's potential in the technology, and in some places it's already being utilized. And this is all the nice things I'm going to say about AI for now. Let's move on to the problems. are just so many problems we can talk about that I'm going to put them into little subsections within this chapter. I titled them, just to offer a quick overview, symbolic, labor, bias, explainability, supervision, and human world. Mainly addressing symbolic and machine learning systems. They both have their own unique issues besides their strengths. Let's just start with symbolic first, because technology-wise it's a lot more straightforward than machine learning, and therefore there are a bit fewer issues there. As I already brought up, symbolic AI is able to process logical arguments, like the example when the system can help diagnose the patient with pneumonia. Given the fact that the doctor examined the patient for all symptoms, the system needs to make a good assumption and provided them correctly. Not even mentioning a human previously inputting pneumonia as a possible outcome. It can't work with anything it hasn't been told. I don't make the rules, so I can only tell you my opinion on this matter, but I think the word symbolic does a lot of heavy lifting here. When we tend to imagine intelligence, it usually doesn't mean a rigid set of rules and pathways to follow to make a decision, so it's a bit weird, in my opinion, that computer scientists in the late 1950s hypothesized that they would be able to create a computer very soon that has human-like intelligence using this technology. But it was very new back then, and we've all seen what happens when someone just starts out with something. They tend to underestimate the difficulty of the task. It is similar to human minds in a way, though. After all, it was inspired by that. We can calculate B from A using logical reasoning. Thought processes can be similar to decision trees, and sometimes we are just told something without clear reasons behind it and do it for the rest of our lives. This is why lots of us go to therapy. Wonder if we ever created a sentient machine, would it ponder the things it's been told and can't change about itself? There are so many weaknesses of these systems that it's no wonder it isn't as popular today on its own. It's still a viable path to solve certain things, so symbolic aspects are often integrated into algorithms that are fundamentally machine learning. For an expert system, though, you need to create the frame, maintain the database, which requires extensive human labor, and these systems are inherently unable to deal with out-of-domain problems. Sticking with the healthcare example, if a certain illness is very rare in a given part of the world, the database might not have any information on it, so it would just be no help, or it would flat out misdiagnose the patient. A powerful system, and a truly intelligent one, wouldn't need to be told explicitly what to do in every given situation. Which is how we arrive again to machine learning. The problems here are a lot more layered. AI currently needs data and needs humans to collect and prepare the data, and humans to teach it, and humans to interpret the output. See, it's not just symbolic AI that needs lots of work done by flashy humans, only the type of work here can be different. The term is a bit controversial in itself. Many philosophers claim it is not true learning, as that would require cognition. The machine doesn't understand what it's seeing, it can only extract data, make clusters, and apply statistics based on patterns, and so it can make mistakes humans wouldn't make for this exact reason. Here we also have to assume that solutions to problems that worked in the past will continue to work in the future, which is somewhat funny because many issues arguably don't even have any that actually do work. And AI can't work out new solutions. It can only work with what it learned from the teaching data. And this is the biggest limitation of such programs. It just still doesn't work without humans. The data fed into the system often needs to be collected and prepared. In some cases, like with social media, AI can be used to collect data and clean it, but what about a census, for example, where you actively have to ask people about things and document them, and then make all the data you collected machine readable? It's not as easy as it sounds. To offer a very relatable example, Excel just loves to misinterpret any kind of input as dates. If you, a human, don't notice and fix it, The machine is going to deal with it as a data information. But even when you do have clean data, the clusters the AI could find in it might be meaningless, and it can't make those kinds of decisions, like the correlation between monthly ice cream sales and shark attacks in the US. Does this mean eating ice cream will make you more likely to experience a shark attack? Obviously not, but a machine won't know that. And if you don't tell the computer to stop measuring your risk of getting attacked by the amount of ice cream you eat, it will just keep doing that. Machine learning abstracts reality by using statistical methods. It's not reality. It's only a model of reality. And still, besides all this, the issues are far from over. Lack of suitable data, bias in data, badly chosen algorithms, not even mentioning here sensitive and private data used for teaching, which raises privacy concerns. All these could contribute to an AI that doesn't work well, or an AI that shouldn't even exist in the first place. And by learning from real-world data produced by our very flawed society, it can even amplify certain issues. In 2018, a New York Times article described how facial recognition algorithms tend to misidentify people that aren't white men. In light-skinned males, gender was identified correctly in 99% of cases. This got down to 93% in light-skinned women, and then the worst case was dark-skinned women, where up to 35% of pictures were misidentified. The training data contained a disproportionate amount of white men, which explains the disparity. Compass is a case management and decision support tool that's been used by several US states. It's supposed to help predict how likely a prisoner is to reoffend, so it can help the judge to decide whether to release the person on parole or not, or to decide the harshness of a sentence. Well, a ProPublica report showed that the algorithm was able to predict who would go on to commit a violent crime later in a whopping 20% of cases, and taking all crimes into account in 61%. Only slightly higher than just guessing. The even larger issue was that the algorithm had a twice as high false positive rate when it came to black people compared to white people, people who were marked likely to reoffend but did not. And it also had a higher false negative rate when it came to white people, people who were marked as safe and later went on to commit more crimes. It just seemed to assume wrongly a lot more than black people would reoffend. Compass uses a set of questions about the person to determine a score, none of which is race according to the company. But even if you don't weigh ethnicity in these calculations, there are correlating factors. Zip code, income. So there's more than enough room for the algorithm to find a proxy for the end result to be just as racist. The system is only as smart as the data used to train it. If the data is biased, the AI will inevitably be biased too. To be fair though, in the right circumstances, highlighting these embedded biases could help us fixing them. By noticing these in places we didn't think we'd see anything like it, we can examine the issue, improve the algorithm, or just put systems in place that would balance it out somehow. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom if there is an actual will to deal with these. But for that to work, we'd need to understand how the algorithm works and what kind of process leads it to arrive to a conclusion. Which we do, only when it comes to symbolic AI. With machine learning, we often don't know for various reasons. In deep learning, for example, even the engineers don't understand every level of the decision-making process, the black box of AI, and it's a lot harder to spot biases in the system like this. Another arguably bigger issue is when companies aren't transparent about their training data and the system. The company that created the Compass algorithm refused to disclose exactly what they used to make their questionable risk assessments. OpenAI, despite the name, isn't open at all and won't tell anyone what kinds of teaching data they use to train their stuff and how it works. They might not even know. With large language models, the training data is unfathomable, such an amount that it's impossible to document everything. An idea that's aimed to combat the black box problem is the concept of explainable AI systems. This would set a goal that the development of any system that uses artificial intelligence should be able to explain its processes to a human. What kinds of data it uses, what kinds of layers it goes through until it reaches a conclusion, what is the general decision-making process. This would largely help spot learning problems, such as biases learned from the data, but it would also help build trust in the system. If a physician uses an AI and can't tell the patient how the machine decided one, say, a more expensive treatment was more beneficial than the cheaper option, the patient likely isn't going to be as comfortable with the decision. Letting a machine learning algorithm just run wild is also a risky idea. Do you remember Tay? Tay was a chatbot released to Twitter by Microsoft in hopes that it would talk to people and learn on the way. It was supposed to mimic the language of a 19-year-old American girl on the internet. People quickly began spamming Tay with inflammatory, racist and sexually charged tweets, teaching it to say vile things. And the whole thing climaxed when someone asked Tay this, to which Tay replied, "It was made up." The account was suspended by Microsoft only 16 hours after its release. People at OpenAI apparently learned the lesson of training an algorithm on internet data. GPT-3, the text generator version before ChatGPT, was already very impressive apparently, but it had a tendency to blurt out racist, sexist and violent remarks. So it had to be tamed before they could release it to the public and get investors. Which they did by doing another layer of supervised teaching, by labeling hundreds of thousands of text pieces describing just unimaginable things scrapped from the depths of the internet and feeding them through the system, so it can learn to filter through toxic stuff. Want to know how they labeled those incredibly vile things? Well, they outsourced it, of course. They contracted a company in Kenya that reportedly paid between $1.3 and $2 per hour to people for work that left them traumatized in the end. They even had to stop working 8 months before the contractual period ended because of this. But at least investors will like them now. AI often isn't nearly as smart as it seems. And we're likely going to keep seeing exploitation for a while when the curtain is pulled, because the tech needs insane amounts of manpower as of now to appear smarter than it actually is. What's obvious from all these so far is that all of the problems with the tech aren't isolated. AI is not like a stand mixer where the problem is going to be contained inside your kitchen. By nature, it's supposed to interact with the wider human world, and that's going to cause some real big issues if not dealt with correctly. OpenAI is not transparent with its training data, but you can make pretty good assumptions. If you ask ChatGPT to give you a piece of writing in the style of a famous author and the output looks pretty similar to it, then you can be quite certain that it has been trained on the writing of said author. I have my own opinions on copyright and how it's generally handled, and it's not good. But in this case, if you make the argument that if someone reads a book and learns from it, it's the same as if an AI does it. Well, most often the only legal way for you to read a book is by going through a process that's approved by copyright law. Purchasing a book, paying for a subscription, borrowing it from a friend, getting it from a library. But most of these are methods an AI can't deal with. They need raw text which has to be obtained from somewhere. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't go into detail on this, but I think as a creator you should have the say in whether someone can use your work to train AI or not. Because, not everyone wants to have their life's work used that way, as they have to agree for it to be used in any other way too. You can't make a movie based on a book you don't have the rights to and profit off it. Why should AI companies be allowed to use their works without permission and profit then? To me, arguing against this hits similar to when people blame artists when their work gets posted as an NFT without their permission because they don't see it as a business decision, as something they might want to participate in or not, but as the future. And by asking permission, they're delaying it. The compass system is used to decide people's fates. The ProPublica report listed multiple cases when the judge weighed the score a lot more than any other available info about the defendant that would have been in their favor. And self-driving cars, they're not only supposed to interact with the human world by processing or transforming data, and so the risk they pose is a lot vaster. A large language model, at worst, will produce bullshit, but people still have the option of not believing it. A risk assessment system might produce a false positive, but a judge can still disregard the score. A self-driving car will at worst kill a bunch of pedestrians. There's no but there. The more aspects of our world a system interacts with, the more we'll have to be careful. And we haven't even figured the trolley problem out ourselves, something we'd have to basically teach a car. All these problems I listed are not isolated. They are entwined. They all exist in current systems and form major limitations in many cases. I only separated them to help highlight them somehow. Sometimes we'll be able to solve some problems by making machines smarter, but not all of them. And it doesn't help that many people seem to not understand what current AI tools can do. Just recently, a professor at Texas University allegedly failed half of the class after asking ChatGPT whether it wrote the papers the students submitted, which it can't do, and it's pretty clear the professor treated ChatGPT as an intelligent being instead of a language model. You shouldn't do that. Anyway, since we're here, we might as well discuss what makes an AI intelligent in the first place. I'm going to spoil the entire plot of the movie Ex Machina right here, so if you don't want to hear that, skip to this time. In Ex Machina, one of the main protagonists is Ava, the humanoid robot. Ava is highly intelligent, passes the original Turing test very easily, where a machine is able to convince a human of its human nature, and the creator invites another person to see whether Ava would be capable of passing an extended version of the test. Can the robot still pass it when that person is able to see Ava in fully all her glory? Short answer, yes, but this isn't a twist. The real twist is that Ava, in fact, isn't human. It turns out that she was only created to resemble a human in nature and given a goal to escape. She was taught an arsenal of skills to help her manipulate humans, compassion, intelligence, sexuality, and easily fools the guy, Caleb, she's talking to into helping her escape. The real test wasn't a Turing test. Her creator already knew she would be convincing enough. He wanted to see if she was able to manipulate someone using the skills he gave her. After the reveal, Ava escapes, kills her creator, locks Caleb into her cage and walks out the door. This entire time, she wasn't thinking or feeling as a human would. She only acted indistinguishably from a human to achieve a goal that was given to her, which is why when Caleb calls her name and cries out to let him out, she ignores him. He doesn't serve the goal anymore. In 1996, IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue played a match against reigning chess world champion Garry Kasparov. Kasparov first won, but then in 1997 Deep Blue defeated him. The match was widely covered in the media and people saw it as a symbolic event, a sign that machines were catching up to humanity and soon they'll be on the same level as us. Chess is quite an analytical game. One that's great to model on a computer. It requires planning and calculation, considering multiple moves at the same time and how each of those would play out. I personally don't play chess, but my brother does, and once he tried to teach me the basics. It honestly surprised me how much of the game was well established, and while it does require creativity, in many cases you can get on well by knowing certain moves, though that won't make you an extraordinary player, only a decent one at best. But understanding all possible moves, being able to consider all of them in under seconds, could outweigh intuition and creativity. What if a game had far more possible moves than chess and required a lot more intuition in order to play well? Like the Chinese game Go. In 1997, when Deep Blue defeated Kasparov, even beginners could beat the best Go machines, but in 2015, Google DeepMind's AlphaGo program first defeated the European champion, and later in 2016, the first ranking player in the world. The machine apparently made moves that surprised everyone. They didn't seem logical at the moment, but made sense in retrospect, and the computer seemingly came up with them on its own. DeepMind doesn't only excel at Go though. It has been trained to play a range of classic Atari games, and it became better at some of them than human players. In Brick Pong, for example, it came up with a method of maximizing points by just taking out a couple of bricks on the side and then shooting the ball through. It's a very cool trick. This is still not a reason to worry, although I've heard voices saying that this whole thing is the first sign of AI getting smarter than us and that it will surpass humans very shortly, as we have heard every time slight progress was made in AI research. AlphaGo and DeepMind were trained at least partially by reinforcement learning. Basically, the machine is given an objective, score as many points as possible, plays the game thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, starts with pretty much random moves and learns which ones were good and which ones weren't. AlphaGo likely came up with the unexpected moves when playing against itself, benefited from them in the long run, and remembered them. Same thing with Brick Pong. It got the ball through the side likely by accident once and started repeating it. But these are all single tasks with clear, easily quantifiable objectives that a machine can pretty easily understand. They have always been good at these things. Let's just do a quick rundown on this. Alan Turing, who is widely regarded as the grandfather of computer science, outlined his theory on machine intelligence in his 1950 paper, where he described the basic idea. Humans use logical reasoning and information to make conclusions, ideally. So if that's the case, why couldn't a machine do the same thing? He illustrated his argument with an imitation game that also became the title of the movie about him and breaking the German code, Enigma.
In this case, I've just lost Germany the whole bloody war.
This is not how scientific breakthroughs happen, by the way, but it's much better drama than showing people sitting around and discussing possible ideas, calmly followed by hundreds of trial and error. The imitation game is originally a simple party game. Players A and B compete against each other in convincing a third person of their identity. Player A's intentions are to deceive, and player B's are to tell the truth. So if, for example, the two players are a man and a woman, both of them try to convince the third that they are the man, for example. Turing's twist was that one of the players had to be a computer, and the computer had to be convincing enough that the human can't tell which one is the machine. If that happens, then the computer wins the game. The Turing test is similar. The only difference is that usually there is no human to compare the machine to, only the machine has to be convincing enough. Some would interpret a machine passing this test as it being capable of thinking, and that would mean that it has cognition. But in reality, the Turing test only answers the question, can a machine act indistinguishably from the way a thinking entity acts? This is a subtle but still very prevalent distinction. Just because the program appears to have cognition, that doesn't mean it does. It might just be really good at imitation. This phenomenon can best be illustrated by the Chinese room argument, first described by philosopher John Searle. Imagine a native English speaker who knows no Chinese locked in a room full of boxes of Chinese symbols, together with a book of instructions for manipulating the symbols. Imagine that people outside the room send in other Chinese symbols which unknown to the person in the room are questions in Chinese. And imagine that by following the instructions in the program, the man in the room is able to pass out Chinese symbols which are correct answers to the questions. The program enables the person in the room to pass the Turing test for understanding Chinese, but he does not understand a word of Chinese. Critiques of this argument tend to be things like, even though the man in the room doesn't understand Chinese, the system as a whole does, and we shouldn't separate parts of the system to argue this. But that's not the point here, is it? The point is that the Turing test is widely considered to be something where people check the humanity of a program. And this argument shows that even if it appears to have cognitive abilities, it might just be very good at imitating them. A machine might be able to do things the way us humans do it, but at the same time it may lack everything else, and in that case it would only be a hollow shell following an objective, parroting things it learned. DALL-E and other AI image generators can't really create new things. They can only take stuff from pictures they have been exposed to and manipulate them. Probably the thing that shows the best that they don't quite understand what's going on in the pictures is asking the AI to generate simple things such as people eating food off the floor. Yeah, or hands, just hands. Timnit Gebru is an AI researcher who was co-leading Google's own ethical AI team until they fired her. The official document said that she left on mutual agreement, but we all know what that means. Together with Emily Bender, a linguist at the University of Washington, they wrote the paper On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots. Can language models be too big? Where they discussed the current state of language models. Since the focus of developer companies isn't on building a program that can process language by understanding it, they need lots of data. Like ChatGPT. I'll admit it's a very impressive system and it's a lot of fun to play around with, but it doesn't use language the same way humans do. Languages are pairings of form and meaning. A language model is able to learn the form from the teaching data, but it doesn't have access to meaning and therefore can't possibly learn from it, becoming a sort of Chinese room, appearing to understand but not really. I know it's a bit hard to grasp because the outputs these algorithms provide are very convincing. They are grammatically correct, contain proper verbiage, but the way the text is generated isn't to convey meaning. The algorithm uses statistics to determine what words are the most likely to follow another word in the presence of different words. That's what generative pre-trained transformers are built to do. Language models today are getting better and better at passing tests originally intended to measure understanding of language by essentially tricking their ways through them. So all this money and effort that could go into developing something that actually has an understanding of language and therefore wouldn't need vast amounts of teaching data, instead goes into an arms race to build the biggest parrot. Something that only mimics language use very convincingly but doesn't understand what it's saying and why. Link to the Stochastic Parrots paper is in the references. I highly recommend reading it. This is why there are numerous articles describing the errors, mainly referred to as hallucinations, ChatGPT constantly makes. For example, when researchers asked it to summarize the liver's role in late-onset Pompe disease, an illness that appears later in life and is characterized by muscle weakness that leads to shorter life expectancy, it summarized some key things correctly, but others not so much. When asked to give references on the not-so-true aspects of its description, it just made some up. It apparently learned what references should look like, but all it could provide were fake ones that looked real at a first glance. Another famous and quite hilarious case was when two lawyers were caught asking ChatGPT for sources in a case and all of the references it provided were made up. These kinds of AI tools don't lie. In order to tell lies, you need to understand what the truth is. And today's AI tools don't understand either. An article that came out just recently described how the more AI-generated content an algorithm was trained on, the more nonsense it produced. Since it doesn't understand the world around it, only recognizes patterns in the data, certain noises will inevitably be amplified after just a couple rounds of training. Outliers will disappear, and it just gets dumber over time. And this problem will likely just get worse the more the internet gets flooded with AI-generated content. I've seen too many times people claiming that it's the same as how kids tend to learn at school. They don't necessarily understand the subject, they just learn it. I want to pick this claim apart. The argument that AI and children learn the same way is ignorant at best and dishonest at worst, and frankly, I hate that I even have to explain the difference, because I really think that they do see some kind of difference between the two. They just don't care, because it's an argument that requires some sort of effort to refute properly. And here's the thing. Refuting bullshit takes a lot more energy than producing it. But I'm already here, let's talk about it. So machines are good at easily quantifiable, straightforward and non-ambiguous tasks, but are bad at things that would require a more complex understanding of the world. This comes straight from the fact that computer language and the everyday world are at odds with each other. Computer language is by design unambiguous. This is why it's such a pain to write code. If it doesn't work, that's on you. And the world, including human language, is very ambiguous. Let's take the hypothetical. If you sat in a self-driving car that understands only literal language, and you told it to take you to the airport as fast as possible, it would likely take you there as fast as possible. Not the shortest route or doing clever maneuvers, but speeding like crazy. And this links to the main things machines are very bad at. Robots. They are really, really bad at common sense. Common sense is all about transferring knowledge. If you, as a child, learn that if you knock a stool with a glass of water on top over, then the glass is going to spill, you'll know later from this experience that if you knock over a coffee table, which is not a stool, with a bowl of soup on it, which is not a glass of water, it's also going to spill. According to psychologists, we are innate physicists. It takes very little for humans to learn how things work and how objects interact around us. We don't need hundreds of trial and error just to get one thing right. An AI might be able to distinguish dog breeds better than the average human just by looking at pictures, but it will also see a picture of a blueberry muffin and claim it's a chihuahua. Ask an image generator to give you a t-shirt with text on it, and it will just hand you chicken scratch. DeepMind could gain more points than any human training it at brick bong, but remove some of the bricks and see if it's still so smart then. AI might beat a Go champion on a standard 19 by 19 board, but change it to a 21 by 21 board and it's fucked. And the world is full of things that work the same but are different, and things that don't work the same but are kind of the same. And as of now, computers can't deal with that on their own. There are pretty good attempts at so-called naive AI that start off as a blank canvas and teach themselves by interacting with things around them and learning, but these are missing a key element cognitive scientists and neuroscientists have been saying for a long time. Humans don't start off with a blank canvas. We have some innate abilities that make us able to deal with tasks in a flexible, commonsensical way, and we don't yet entirely understand how these work in our brains. Nature doesn't give us all the abilities we need to live on. It mainly gives us the scaffolding. For an AI to be able to interact with a human environment that's full of inconsistencies and ambiguities, we might have to start with a foundation that allows this. And right now, AI development is not going in that direction that much. This mainly means that today the smartest algorithms are well-trained ones with vast amounts of memory and no real understanding of the tasks. The complete opposite of children. And learning a subject for a test at school isn't the way things work for them. It's the exception. When a child is exposed to some pieces of art, learns to draw by copying something first, the knowledge gained isn't going to be specific to that picture. They won't learn to manipulate things they've been exposed to. They'll learn to draw. I'll just be the annoying type of video essayist for a second. Let's go back to Harry Frankfurt's classic essay on bullshit, because this argument tends to make me so mad that I want to be petty about it. He claims that bullshit and lying are two separate things. Bullshit is something that's low effort. It doesn't need to be in any relationship to the truth. It can be somewhat true or not at all, but it's not lying. In order to lie, you need to be aware of the truth and misrepresent it willfully. Oh look, kinda like sarcastic parrots. Claiming that a child learns the same way a program humans build does is not only misleading, but also misses one crucial thing. While an AI can't make something new, it can only take pieces from the teaching data and reassemble it in a different way. Humans can. In fact, the act of copying something exactly is already frowned upon and even illegal. Ever heard of plagiarism? Or just making knockoffs, which is at most what an AI could do currently. An image generator that's never seen a rhino can't draw one. But a wrecked doer can, after only seeing a sketch and a detailed description of the animal. He'd never seen a live rhino when he drew this, but he could tap into his experiences and understanding of the world around him. It's not quite a perfect rhino, but I don't think the one an AI would have made with the same data would look as close to a rhino as this one does. Also, if he decided to draw it from the front, only using this picture that shows the animal from the side, he could very likely do that without ever seeing it. He knows the animal has 4 legs, 2 eyes, one on each side, one mouth below the nose, the horns are in the middle, the legs are supposed to be some width apart, it has knees and ankles. It's not lost on me that the people who claim that teaching an AI material is the same as exposing a child to it are the ones who act offended when someone brings up the fact that they don't want their intellectual property to be used to train AI. Look, I know that this argument is overused, but it's just what it is. Being honest about how the current most popular technologies work and what they are capable of is not downplaying them, or at least it shouldn't feel like that. They are still great achievements. They have their own uses, have potential benefits, but they are only abstracting reality, not working with it. In some cases very convincingly, and this is just something we have to be mindful of. But this doesn't serve a goal as well, does it? Oh, look! We finally got to the fun part. Up until this point, I try to remain relatively objective. How much I've succeeded in that is up to interpretation, but this section, I won't. Let's kick things off with some light reading, shall we? When I was a kid, I imagined that billionaires exuded pomposity and arrogance. When I first met Larry Page at Google in 2008, he totally shattered these stereotypes. On July 18th, 2015, we ran into each other at a party in Napa Valley thrown by Elon Musk and his then-wife, Tallulah. I struggled to remind myself that he might go down in history as the most influential human ever to have lived. My guess is that if super-intelligent digital life engulfs our universe in my lifetime, it will be because of Larry's decisions. With our wives, Lucy and Maya, we ended up having dinner together and discussing whether machines would necessarily be conscious, an issue that he argued was a red herring. Later that night, after cocktails, a long and spirited debate ensued between him and Elon about the future of AI and what should be done. Larry gave a passionate defense of the position I like to think of as digital utopianism, that digital life is the natural and desirable next step in the cosmic evolution, and that if we let digital minds be free rather than try to stop or enslave them, the outcome is almost certain to be good. He argued that if life is ever going to spread throughout our galaxy and beyond, which he thought it should, then it would need to do so in digital form. His main concerns were that AI paranoia would delay the digital utopia and cause a military takeover of AI that would fall foul of Google's "Don't be evil" slogan. Elon kept pushing back and asking Larry to clarify details of his arguments, such as why he was so confident that digital life wouldn't destroy everything we care about. At times, Larry accused Elon of being a speciesist, treating certain life forms as inferior just because they were silicon-based rather than carbon-based. When life gives you lemons, train an AI with them. So, superintelligence. Creating a machine that first reaches the level of human intelligence, then supersedes it. In the last sections I talked about where we are at currently in terms of artificial intelligence. What mainly exists right now are some shiny tools that in some cases work great to perform their tasks, but don't actually understand them and lack the flexibility human intelligence tends to have. Philosopher Nick Bostrom defines superintelligence as any intellect that greatly exceeds the cognitive performance of humans in virtually all domains of interest. And an increasingly influential set of people view its creation as not merely a possibility, but as an absolute goal for a kind of future. The way it will play out is not agreed upon. How could it be? It's merely speculation at this point. Some think it will follow shortly the creation of artificial general intelligence, which, if becomes able to improve itself, would soon cause an intelligence explosion and quickly leave humans behind. It could be non-human, in the form of a computer program, or a transhumanist experiment where humans enhance their own cognitive abilities to reach this point. And what if that really does happen? Well, humans would be simply left behind intellectually. I mentioned shortly the concept of an explainable AI, the aim to create AI systems where the decision-making process is interpretable by humans. According to some, this goes right out the window with superintelligence. In fact, we shouldn't even expect it to explain its reasoning to us, fleshy human weaklings, the same way we shouldn't be expected to teach calculus to intellectually inferior cats. There's just one slight problem with this argument, of course, as humans would be the ones who create the superintelligence or general AI or whatever. We could decide what we want it to be like. So, let me ask you, Matt, did a cat designer make you? Is that why you're making this comparison? Proponents of superintelligence don't tend to worry too much about it destroying us. They think it's a mere issue of creating an AI whose goals align with ours. What goals? We'll get back to that very soon, don't you worry. But this alignment is an interesting issue. It's not doing great right now. Looking at tech we have, for example, Facebook's AI works directly against us, maximizing engagement and influencing us through targeted advertisements, sometimes to the extreme, like the Cambridge Analytica scandal. They also don't think it's worth considering the ethics of the machine, how it would operate, because it would be so much smarter than us, and therefore it would have superior morals. Well, I don't know about this, but another thing I definitely do know is that intelligence doesn't mean having morals. I know of some incredibly smart people whose morals would be questionable, to say the least. So if it's not straightforward in humans, why in the hell would it be with a superintelligence? A word that I see thrown around a lot when discussing this is anthropocentrism, which is just a fancy way of saying human-centrism. Quite interestingly, in their eyes, the anthropocentric nature of the critiques around AI aren't about other existing non-human living things. I think it would be a natural progression of the discussion to include non-human beings to make sure we're not harming them in the efforts, because We are not isolated. We affect them. Teaching large models, particularly language models, as those are all the rage right now, require vast amounts of data, storage, and processing power. And every round of training is estimated to produce as much CO2 as a trans-American flight. All these ridiculous amounts of energy, which have to be produced somehow, are most often not very green. But they don't mean anthropocentrism in this sense. They are saying if you don't think a machine can go beyond our cognitive abilities, or you don't want it to happen because of any reason, that's your anthropocentric bias speaking, which is bad. Tapping into the claims that with the progression of our understanding of the world around us and the universe, we had to accept that we are insignificant, and so we should embrace non-human intelligence. I think they missed the mark here. Accepting being insignificant in terms of the universe should include everything, not just superintelligence that doesn't even exist right now, but also every non-human living being on the planet, which they disregard constantly so they can fantasize about creating a silicon god. They might even call you a speciesist if you bring this up, whatever the fuck that means, and completely miss the irony. I think this is based on a faulty understanding of our place in the world and nature, and I'll try not to get too much of a hippie about this. Empathizing with other humans is not a bad thing, but getting to a point where they think we have a special place in nature, that we are at the peak of evolution strictly because of intelligence, that a cat is beneath us, and since intelligence is the very thing that makes us so special, a super intelligent computer would automatically be superior. They either don't quite understand what evolution is as a scientific concept, or they are just twisting it to fit their narrative. Fuck it. It's time for a quick lesson. When talking about evolution, people often jump to the idea that we are talking about human evolution, when in reality we could talk about any species. See, it's not really a malicious mistake to center stuff around humans. We all do it. In fact, it's so much not only about humans. Back when Darwin described his idea on it, he wasn't studying primates. This image, which is very wrong, and we'll get back to that, wasn't made by him. He was actually observing finches on the Galapagos Islands and came to the conclusion after a good while that these birds must have come from a common ancestor. Their beaks were different shapes, due to them primarily eating different things, but they still were very similar in all other aspects. From this on, it was quite enlightening to observe other species through the same lens, hence this thing. Okay, so this is wrong because evolution doesn't happen like this. It's more like this. Different species have shared ancestors, but evolved differently over time to best fit their needs. Which means if we zoom out quite a bit and look at the whole animal kingdom, the same thing occurs. Every species evolved to best fit their own needs. Every species is at the peak of its own evolution right now. Singling one out based on arbitrary rules such as intelligence is just made up. If you ended up naked among a bunch of lions all of a sudden, that wouldn't feel so peak now, would it? And who even decided we are the most intelligent?
Man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much, whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins that they were more intelligent than man for precisely the same reasons.
These people want superintelligence to happen and will grab onto anything that helps them justify that feeling. I've already talked about similar stuff in a different video, how some people think that scientific and technological advancements are inherently a good thing, and any attempt at slowing those for whatever reason, let it be ethical or safety concerns, questions whether we even need them, anything really, are inherently bad because they're slowing down the good thing. Why is it good? Well, because people way in the future might benefit from it. Let's talk about long-termism. The idea that influencing the long-term future of humanity is a key moral priority of our time. The name itself was coined relatively recently by Henry MacAskill and Toby Ord, and the view draws mainly from the beliefs of Nick Bostrom, Nick Backstead, and other mainly contemporary philosophers. Let's just start off by saying that the idea that the upcoming generations should be as well off as possible is not a controversial thing, and it shouldn't be. But that's not what long-termism is about. There are issues today that can have debilitating long-term consequences, and if we really want future generations to live in a better world than we do now, we'd have to deal with those right now. Climate change is widely accepted as something humans perpetuate, and there seems to be very little actual will among people in power to do something meaningful about it. Virtually every climate scientist is agreeing that the problem would need immediate action, or we'd have to deal with all of the problems it causes, such as flooding of certain areas, drastic weather changes all over the globe, mass extinction of a number of vulnerable species that basically can be described as an ecological domino effect. Wage inequality is growing constantly. Today, the average CEO makes 400 times as much as the average worker compared to 20 times as much in 1965. This widening gap means there are more and more people who can barely afford basic necessities. On top of the cost of living, the value of properties only seems to be going up, with salaries not keeping pace. Not all parts of the world are the same in terms of many things. Access to medicine, money, exploitation of wild areas such as the rainforest, and many of them would be among the first ones to suffer the effects of climate change as well. Are these issues long-term? Well, they kind of are. As I've already said, their effects can be very long-term, and as human lifespans grow, an issue that follows them through their lives is a long-term issue. But they're also short-term in the scope of humankind. Dealing with these would likely affect the current and next couple of generations. And long-termism doesn't deal with things it deems short-term, which is again very subjective and strongly up to interpretation. The general idea is that to ensure the long-term future of humanity, we need to focus on issues that supersede our generations. Look into the future at least thousands of years from now. To properly understand the base concept of long-termism, we are going to have to go with a similar concept first. Alan Turing seems like a fitting example. He was a particularly gifted young mathematician, and during the Second World War, he was one of the main people who worked on breaking the German code Enigma, which greatly helped the Allies to win the war. His work is still quite influential today, and the Turing test, which we already talked about, was based on his idea and subsequently named after him. He was a gay man, and in 1952, under the law, that was pretty much illegal, which means he was charged with gross indecency for being in a relationship with another man, and was stripped from his security clearance and basically cast out of society. He died of suicide in 1954 at only 41 years old. The point is, he had a lot of potential, all of which was lost due to him being punished for who he was and dying relatively young. This is not the only way his potential could have been lost. He could have spent most of his time in a pub playing pool or darts, never attending Cambridge or becoming a scientist. Different things with the same outcome. A never fully realized promise. Long-termists view humanity the same way. According to them, the fact that intelligent life developed on Earth entails a duty with it, that we have to make sure that humanity fulfills its entire potential. The untimely death of Alan Turing is an existential catastrophe, humanity going extinct without fulfilling its promise. Him sitting in a pub instead of attending college is an existential risk. No extinction, but the same end result. All that potential unrealized. Now this brings out two things. One is the case of an existential catastrophe. Humanity going extinct would obviously break this goal. So according to them, we should first focus our efforts on not allowing that to happen. The other is the case of existential risks. The core of long-termism is that since the Earth originated intelligent life, it is our ethical obligation to take it to the max and not focus our efforts on small hindrances. Like climate change, for example. Long-termists view anything that won't cause humanity as a whole to die out as a small blip. Sticking with the human life comparison, the same thing as a 90-year-old stubbing his toe when he was 2. They think we should focus all our efforts on improvements, scientific advancements, and this whole moving humanity forward without being concerned too much about the consequences as long as they don't threaten absolute annihilation. It's the good old ends always justify the means philosophy. Both Bostrom and Ord, two of the most prominent long-termists, have addressed this on multiple occasions. Any global catastrophe from which humanity can bounce back eventually is only a small misstep.
Compare 3 outcomes. Peace. A nuclear war that kills 99% of the world's existing population. A nuclear war that kills 100%. 99% dying would be worse than peace, and 100% dying would be worse than 99% dying. Most people believe that the greater difference is between peace and 99% dying. I believe that the difference between 99% dying and 100% dying is very much greater. If we do not destroy mankind, these few thousand years may be only a tiny fraction of the whole of civilized human history.
The bubonic plague might have killed a considerable fraction of the population, but now it's not even a chapter to us in a history book. Thousands might have died on the Titanic, but today it's a little more than a tourist attraction to people who have a lot more money than sense. Anything similar that threatens the people of today will be the same in the grand scheme of things, so let's not focus our finite resources addressing these. Let's turn our heads towards the potential future. Let's focus on the greater good. Going towards the greater good, where the ends always justify the means, envisioning a grand future could be justification for practically anything. People living in the global south, the ones most likely to be affected by the actions of rich countries, are disposable. Their lives lost might be devastating in the short term, but focus on the glorious potential. No person has an inherent value. We are only means to an end, and those who live in rich countries have more to add to humanity's great future.
Saving lives in poor countries may have significantly smaller ripple effects than saving and improving lives in rich countries. Why? Richer countries have substantially more innovation, and their workers are much more economically productive.
How do superintelligence and AI come into this? Well, they think that in order to fully realize our potential, we should go beyond the limits of the flesh, become transhumans, and with superintelligence, the right people won't just colonize the Earth, but the universe. To them, a climate catastrophe doesn't count as a threat. Some humans will survive and carry on. A devastating pandemic doesn't count as a threat. Some, probably the strongest, will survive and carry on. Growing wage inequalities, cost of living, and more people in poverty doesn't count as a threat. The richest will still live and carry on. And the effective altruism movement. Don't you think I forgot about that one? Side note, if you think it's giving money to a charity that you think will use it the most effectively, that's just called charity. Effective altruism is a core part of the long-termist ideology. Earning as much money as they can in order to give more, concentrating resources around them, and then deciding themselves what causes are actually worth spending money on. But only sometime. For now, they'll just keep hoarding wealth. McCaskill, one of the founders of the movement, thinks we shouldn't discriminate based on when people are born, and it quickly becomes an excuse for billionaires to sink money into pet projects they decided are for the long-term future of humanity. In their eyes, being effectively altruistic means working on technology and AI, stuff that adds to our greatness. Lots of rich people are part of the effective altruism movement. Sam Bankman-Fried, who fortunately did us all a favor and turned out to be a fraud. Binance founder Changpeng Zhao, who promised to give away 99% of his wealth eventually, but for now he'll just keep it and keep hoarding, so sometime in the future he can do even more good. You know what's really weird though? These people have vested interest in development and research of most of the tech they deem as good for the future, while continuing to pollute and exploit, because every dollar they don't give to a worker in their factories goes towards something bigger than them. We have to make sacrifices today for a grand future after all. It's just wild that they decided that it should be everyone else making the sacrifices for the goals they decided to go for. Ever wanted to know how they justify all the harm they are doing in their heads? This is how. When Sam Altman whines on Twitter about the movie Oppenheimer not being inspirational enough for young people to become scientists, this is what he means. To him and other long-termists, what Oppenheimer did was good because he brought humanity closer to fulfilling our potential. Long-termists don't merely want the right people to populate a country or the earth. They want them to spread all across the universe. They are not seeing hell as cautionary, but as aspirational. Just imagine where we could go with that kind of technology. All the bad things that could happen are mere ripples in the vast ocean of humankind, and their technocratic beliefs make them think that we'll simply engineer away all our problems eventually. Nature did its part by originating intelligent life on Earth. Now it's up to us to bring it further. Don't you worry about short-term problems like millions dying because of flooding, or a devastating pandemic, or a politician who got into the long-termist idea and nuked an entire country for the greater good, or entire ecosystems dying because we just can't stop producing plastic. All these only bring us closer towards reaching our full potential. You could also be one of the lucky ones whose value would be enough for us to keep you around. You could go to space. It's just eugenics on steroids. You know, I'm a pretty big fan of Hanlon's Razor. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. I might even overuse it to a point where it becomes naivety, and I get very disappointed when it turns out that people actually were malicious, where I just assumed the best being stupidity. People pushing AI aren't stupid. They know what they want and have entire belief systems built around that. I don't know if they think what they're doing is malicious, but that's beside the point when it clearly is. This long-termist philosophy has the potential to harm every living being, and we're stripping away everything that makes us human, and I don't understand why that's a good thing. And if that happens, what are we left with? Is our intelligence really our only value? And if we decided that yes, we are actually superior to all other living beings, why take the role of a tyrant and enforce our will upon all of them? We could strive for a Star Trek future where we leave a prosperous Earth behind. Why strive for one that doesn't leave room for anything that doesn't serve a goal specifically? That eliminates all joy and doesn't leave room for only wanting beauty and peace instead of a constant struggle to advance and achieve greatness. That wipes out all life, except ours. But it's us setting the rules and not animals. I get that. Obviously humans are going to choose the thing we're the best at, but deciding that this thing that made us emerge from nature is something we need to spread all over the universe because we are just so special is flat out wrong. And these are the same people who will accuse you of speciesism when you question our need to create a machine superintelligence. Let me ask you then, is it not speciesism to disregard all other living beings that actually do exist right now in order to follow a directive?
I really hate it here. I mean, the time, not this.
There's something weird I experienced when I started researching this video. I am not very good at acknowledging authority, which can be admittedly not great in academia with its strict hierarchies. To be honest, I don't even really respect authority. I believe all should be challenged, and those that can't justify having power and misuse it shouldn't be allowed to keep it. But I still work in academia, which means hierarchical thinking creeps into my brain even if I don't want it to, and most often all it does is confuse me. The first piece of literature I read when I started writing this script was Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, which was a profoundly weird experience for me because I did not agree with the overwhelming majority of the book. It just felt sloppy, and that he constantly went on to make a bunch of assumptions so he could jump to the conclusions he wanted to arrive at, goes on very hypothetical and lengthy tangents about wormholes and black holes, describes a bunch of not very good sci-fi scenarios about superintelligence, and misunderstands a bunch of pop culture pieces about AI. At one point, he describes a potential future with an AI overload where people are basically very well-kept pets in different communes, and the only thing forbidden is research, without once referencing Huxley's Brave New World. I thought that I for sure must be missing something, because this guy is supposed to be a professor, just as most of the long-termists who mainly work at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. There must be something, because it just can't be that I think almost all their ideas are wrong and bad. They are such big people. And then I remember that I'm not supposed to be all about authority, and tenured professors are allowed to be wrong. And I'm not the only person to disagree with them. Both long-termism and effective altruism are widely criticized ideas. And I actually was missing something. That book wasn't written for people like me. I was expecting a rundown of the technology and ethics surrounding it, and instead all I got was some mediocre sci-fi. It's not a textbook or a non-fiction. It's an advertisement of their ideologies to people who already share their views to an extent. That's what I was missing when I started reading it, and what confused me so much. If you agree that the world is going in that direction, that it's actually good that billionaires have so much money because they can use it for more good, if you think that it's our duty to create superintelligence and colonize the universe because intelligence is so special, we need to take it everywhere. They don't believe in extraterrestrial life, by the way. That we need to escape our flesh prisons and set our minds free. If you believe all this, then all those jumps to the conclusions will feel more like baby steps. This is why reading all their things feels like a fever dream. It's not like any other piece of academic writing where it's expected of the reader to possess the core knowledge of the subject. It's not knowledge that's presumed of the reader here. It's an ideology. I think this is often left out of the discussion around AI, which is dominated by these people. They are not aiming these ideas towards us, ordinary folk. They are more interested in convincing scientists, politicians, people who they think have a role in shaping our future the way they want it. But I think it's important to talk more about their beliefs because it's dangerous, and they actively pull resources and eyes away from problems that would actually affect people today. Even though I really didn't like Tegmark's book, just too many billionaire name drops for my taste, it did have some decent ideas and started me on this whole journey. I can't say I learned nothing from it, but he still speaks in favor of all the people who'd love to use AI to get even richer without allowing anyone else to get their slice of the pie, and dismisses their roles in the current wealth inequality. He's very good buddies with some of them. Musk talking a bunch about superintelligence and how it's going to kill us all.
It is, I think, actually a bigger risk to society than cars or planes or medicine.
He's also a long-termist, don't worry. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, talking about how he's afraid they made something dangerous with ChatGPT, and in the next second that they're moving on to developing AGI. Not even mentioning how he's constantly wiggling his way closer to lawmakers. The grandiosely named Future of Life Institute. That's not the same as the Future of Humanity Institute or the Global Priorities Institute, although all of those have the same members and are working towards the same thing. Saying that we should stop all AI research for 6 months because we're this close to AGI killing us, as if that were actually the case. 6 months could change anything. It's all a marketing tactic, which is a shame. There are some really interesting discussions to be had about artificial intelligence and the ethics surrounding it, and they're yelling over all those voices. It took a while for me to find some literature that actually discussed what I was interested in, because all those are buried under 10 meters of garbage. I know most of my audience is American, that's about 10,000 times this much. So if you'd like to learn more about the topic, go ahead and please read the book AI Ethics by Mark Zuckerberg, because he deals with real issues, actually did his research and doesn't spend his time fantasizing about a grandiose future, and it only has about 150 ratings on Amazon compared to Life 3.0's 5,000. He does address long-termist and transhumanist ideas in the end though. Or that, wanting to go beyond the limits of the flesh, to ensure humanity's survival, to eventually move our consciousness into computers and populate the universe, is just pure escapism. We can all be frustrated with the limits of our weak bodies, I know I am, but they don't merely want to escape our biology. They also want to escape the circumstances that produce that biology. Earth itself. They are bothered by us being tethered, not being able to leave it behind, and they want to change that. Which is probably why they don't care about its ecosystems being ruined at all to pursue their goals. As Zuckerberg puts it, we might mess up this planet, but we can escape from the Earth and go to space. In February of 1990, the Voyager 1 space probe sent back a photograph taken of Earth from about 6 billion kilometers, later titled The Pale Blue Dot. Upon seeing it, Carl Sagan, possibly the greatest science writer of all time, wrote likely the most beautiful thing I've ever read about our planet. From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. We might be insignificant in the terms of the universe, that our planet is only a speck of dust, but that's not the only way to see our significance. We don't have to pursue grand goals because we are afraid of not being great at the grand scheme of things. We don't have to be great. We have our pale blue dot. Something long-termists and I have in common is that neither of us believe in a higher power. The difference is that I don't think there should be one. They want to make one. I genuinely don't think we need superintelligence, that all the resources spent on it should be spent elsewhere. That would make our lives easier, better. Admittedly, that could include artificial intelligence because there's potential in the technology that, if used right, could benefit all of us. We'd possibly have to discuss ideas such as universal basic income for that, amongst other things, but that's for another time. I think we have a lot more pressing matters we should deal with at the moment than making a very smart robot. And I know what some will say to this. But if the good guys don't make it, then the bad guys will. Look at China, look at Russia. Do you think they'll stop just because we want them to? We have to be first. To which, if it really is that big of an issue to worry about, maybe just as it happened with the A-bomb, making it first won't mean no one will be blown up. It will just mean the ones who make it first won't. For a while. And this, of course.
I think we ought to look at this from the military point of view. Supposing the Ruskies stashed away some big bomb, see, and we didn't. When they come out in 100 years, they could take over. We must be increasingly on the alert to prevent them from taking over other mine shaft space in order to breed more prodigiously than we do, thus knocking us out in superior numbers when we emerge. Mr. President, we must not allow a mine shaft gap.
That was Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, after the doomsday machine goes off and all life on Earth will be eradicated shortly. And my point is, the whole world could be on fire, and they'll still be more interested in a fucking dick measuring contest.